I'm 78 and spent 2 months in a nursing home. What I discovered left me in tears. If anyone had told me even a year ago that I'd end up spending 2 full months in a nursing home, I would have shaken my head and laughed, believing such a notion to be impossible, at least at this stage of my life. I used to think nursing homes were for those who were much older or in far worse health than me, people with no remaining independence, or those who had simply come to the final chapter of their journey. But sometimes life has a way of catching us off guard, placing us in situations we never anticipated. When I first arrived, I honestly believed my stay would be brief, just a short stint to recover from a sudden health issue that demanded professional care. I expected to return home quickly, bounce back to my regular routine, and carry on as usual. Yet those 2 months ended up reshaping the way I view aging, relationships, regret, purpose, and what truly matters day to day. And the lessons that emerged from those days impacted me more deeply than any prior experience in my 78 years. What I discovered inside those walls left me both moved to tears and profoundly changed. And I want to share those revelations now. During my stay, I encountered a wide range of people from various walks of life. Some had been living there for years, their calendars filled with endless days that often blurred into one another, while others arrived more recently and clung to the hope that they'd leave soon. Some still had family members who would visit, bringing in outside food or gifts, sharing stories, and maybe even brightening their day for a few hours. However, I also met individuals who had no one coming through those doors, no calls, no letters, absolutely nothing. Their children seemed too busy, or perhaps they had grown too distant over time. Their friends, many of them, had already passed away, or were themselves in different facilities. Despite the staff's best intentions in a place like that, the sense of loneliness could be overwhelming. Each day, I witnessed how that social isolation sank deeper into people's bones than any physical ailment could. When you're confronted with this reality, it makes you reflect on your own life. You start to question what it is you've prioritized. Was it work? Was it accumulating money, houses, cars, or status symbols? Did you give enough time to nurturing genuine bonds with family, friends, or even neighbors? And while 2 months doesn't seem like a long stretch in the grand scheme of a lifetime, for me it was enough to shift my perspective on what aging really looks and feels like. The intangible lessons I took away from that experience continue to resonate with me every single day. And I want to share them because I believe they hold value for people of any age. Whether you're in your 20s, 50s, or, like me, your late 70s, life is constantly teaching us, if only we are willing to pay attention. At the heart of it all, I learned about the crushing weight of loneliness. I used to think the biggest issues in old age were purely medical: aches, pains, heart trouble, trouble walking, maybe issues with eyesight or hearing. Of course, those are valid concerns, but the most harrowing thing I witnessed was the despair that arises from feeling forgotten. There were residents in the nursing home who rarely had a knock on their door. Occasionally, a nurse would come in to help them with medication or bring them a meal, and that fleeting human contact was all they had. No lively phone calls, no afternoon visits from old friends, no grandchildren popping in with homemade cards or stories from school. Just day after day of quiet, sitting in a chair or lying in bed, watching the clock, maybe hoping for something to happen, for someone to remember them. The routine was disturbingly predictable. Breakfast, a bit of TV, lunch, then maybe sitting in the courtyard if their health permitted, followed by dinner, and bedtime well before the sun had fully set. That type of existence made me appreciate every friend and family member who took the time to check on me. It underscored that the single biggest factor eroding the spirit in old age isn't losing physical abilities. It's the emptiness of being socially and emotionally disconnected. For years before this stay, I had always prided myself on being independent, on working hard to secure a stable financial future. I thought my nest egg, my house, and the things I had gathered over the decades would form a kind of safety net. What I realized instead is that no amount of material wealth can substitute for genuine companionship and human connection. After seeing people who were once incredibly successful, individuals who owned multiple businesses or traveled the world in luxury, now reduced to a single room in a nursing facility, dependent on others for the simplest tasks, I had to confront the truth that money can only do so much. If your health fails and you lose your capacity to look after yourself, your lavish possessions won't care for you. They won't sit by your bedside to comfort you. They won't fill the air with laughter. It becomes painfully clear that what really matters, in the end, is how many moments of real connection you've cultivated. Throughout my stay, I had countless conversations with other residents who shared their stories. I remember talking to a gentleman who once described himself as a self-made man, proud of the empire he built and the assets he accumulated. But now he struggled to lift a spoon or stand without assistance. He admitted that he spent the prime years of his life chasing financial success, believing that once he'd acquired enough, he could retire in comfort. And, sure enough, he had the resources to afford top-notch care. But it didn't change the fact that he was largely confined to his bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to pursue any of the hobbies or adventures he once postponed. He couldn't eat solid foods. He couldn't take a trip to see some new corner of the globe. He couldn't even get up to watch the sunrise without a nurse helping him into a wheelchair. In that moment, he confessed that all the money in the world felt meaningless, because what he truly yearned for, good health and vitality, was no longer within his reach. It was heart-wrenching to see a man who had once been so confident, so capable, reduced to that state of vulnerability and regret. I also witnessed something else. People who had packed their homes with possessions, more furniture than they needed, shelves filled with trinkets from around the world, boxes upon boxes of stored clothes they never wore, suddenly living in a compact space. All those items they'd guarded so carefully over the years were left behind, donated, or thrown out because they simply didn't matter in this new environment. What use was a fancy painting or an expensive piece of furniture when you were confined to a hospital bed, focusing on how to manage daily tasks? It really drove home the notion that memories and shared experiences hold more lasting value than piles of stuff. So many older individuals in the facility reminisced about traveling with family or having small get-togethers in their yards, rather than talking about some prized collection they once owned. I realized I, too, had spent much of my life accumulating things that, in the end, wouldn't bring me comfort when my body started to fail. It prompted me to think about living life more intentionally, placing greater weight on experiences rather than possessions. Another stark reality that became clear is how precious independence is. Before my stay, I'd wake up and never think twice about being able to stand, walk to the kitchen, fix my morning cup of coffee, decide how I wanted to spend the afternoon, and simply go about my day on my own terms. But in the nursing home, you see people who need help just to put on their socks or comb their hair. The staff there, many of whom are incredibly kind and skilled, do their best. But imagine being unable to perform even the smallest tasks without relying on someone else. For many older folks, that loss of independence is worse than any financial struggle they might face. It's a daily reminder that you are no longer the person you used to be. The freedom to make your own decisions, to move at will, to spend your time as you see fit. These are gifts we often overlook in youth and midlife. Yet, once they're gone, it's painfully evident how pivotal they were to feeling human. I began to adopt a new appreciation for every step I could take unaided, every moment of privacy, every chance I had to choose how I spent my time. During those 2 months, I also realized that true happiness can be found in the simplest aspects of life. I met a woman in her mid-80s who had a ready smile for everyone. She'd wake up each day excited for the little things. Maybe a hot cup of tea in the morning, a kind word from the nurse, or the sunshine peeking through the window. Her demeanor stood in stark contrast to some others who constantly fretted about what they had lost, or what they could no longer do. When I asked this upbeat lady how she maintained such a cheerful outlook, she told me she woke up every day deciding to celebrate whatever blessings were still within her reach. She told me that fixating on the misfortunes that come with age, aches, wrinkles, limitations, would only bring her down. Instead, she focused on savoring the sweetness of each small joy that came her way. Watching her smile at the sunlight filtering into the day room, I saw firsthand that happiness doesn't necessarily spring from grand achievements or luxurious possessions, but from the mindset we bring to each moment. And this lesson transcends age. Even if you're young, you can find deep contentment in the daily wonders we usually overlook, like a good conversation or a comforting meal. There's another aspect of human experience that emerged powerfully in the nursing home: the necessity of forgiveness. Many older individuals are weighed down by regrets, grudges, or lingering bitterness, sometimes toward their own children, other times toward parents, siblings, or friends. I'd sit in the lounge area and listen to some of these stories. A few people felt betrayed by family members who they believed never truly cared for them. Others still harbored resentment over a falling out that happened decades ago with a close friend. What struck me was how those who clung to their anger appeared constantly agitated, unhappy, or unsettled. The staff tried their best to make them comfortable, but bitterness can morph into a kind of poison in one's mind and spirit. One woman confided that she wished she had forgiven her sister before her sister passed away. She admitted to lying awake at night, replaying arguments from years past in her mind, wishing she had just let go. That regret haunted her. Observing that dynamic up close taught me the power of forgiveness, not for the sake of excusing someone else's wrongdoing, but to free oneself from the weight that anchors you to pain. When you let go of the anger you carry, you create space for inner peace. It's like setting down a heavy suitcase you've been lugging around for far too long. I, too, realized that if there were any individuals in my life I still held resentment toward, it was time to let it go. And I've done my best to do exactly that. One of the most shocking reminders of life's fragility came unexpectedly one morning. I woke up to find out that one of the residents, a man I had just spoken to the night before at dinner, had passed away quietly in his sleep. We'd had a pleasant conversation not 12 hours earlier, reminiscing about a bygone era, swapping stories and jokes. Then, suddenly, he was gone. I remember standing in the hallway, watching as staff respectfully and quietly managed the aftermath, and realizing that no matter how diligent we are about our health, no matter how many plans we make, we can't predict when our last moment will come. It felt like a jolt, driving home how important it is to seize life's opportunities while we can. So often we tell ourselves we'll do something one day, maybe visit an old friend, take that trip we've always longed for, or learn to play an instrument. But we keep delaying those desires. Then you witness how quickly a vibrant presence can vanish. And you realize there might not be a one day if you keep putting it off. This single event pushed me to reevaluate my own procrastination. I had to ask myself, if not now, then when? All these realizations culminated in the understanding that aging isn't merely about adding years to your life, but about how you choose to live each year. There were people in that nursing home who had effectively made peace with where they were. They had loved deeply, pursued their passions, and tied up loose ends. They didn't dwell on regrets. Instead, they exuded a sense of calm acceptance. Meanwhile, others harbored an agonizing sense of longing. They wanted a chance to turn back time and do things differently. Be kinder to loved ones, take more risks in their youth, or spend more energy on experiences rather than possessions. Listening to their reflections was more impactful than any advice from a book or article. It was raw, honest, and gleaned from a place of lived experience. If anything, it emphasized that growing old doesn't have to be a dreaded process if you've tried to live authentically, but it can become a prison of regret if you haven't. I'm now more motivated than ever to encourage younger generations, and even my own peers for that matter, to invest in relationships and make decisions that lead to fewer regrets. We can't escape the passage of time. Our hair will turn gray, if it's still there at all. Our bodies will slow down, and we'll need more help with daily tasks. That's just a fact of life. But what we can do is decide how we fill our days, how we connect with one another, how we forgive and move forward, how we learn to appreciate the fragile beauty of existence. It's never too early or too late to internalize these truths. Even someone in their 20s can start thinking about the future. Recognizing that a life built around chasing money alone might leave them lonely later on. Or realizing that taking care of their physical health isn't just about vanity or immediate fitness goals, but about ensuring that decades down the line, they can still enjoy the activities they love. Whenever I share my story now, I like to emphasize that we should never take a single day for granted. Before those 2 months, I was guilty of overlooking small joys. I figured I'd have all the time in the world to do the things I wanted to do. Visit old friends, pick up old hobbies, learn something new, or simply relax without feeling guilt over not being productive. But life can shift in a heartbeat, and if we haven't been mindful, we might find ourselves with more regrets than fond memories. This is why I urge people to say the things they need to say to the ones they love. Express gratitude, apologize if necessary, and share affection without holding back. So many folks in the nursing home had letters they wished they'd sent, phone calls they wished they'd made, or words of love they wished they'd spoken. Sometimes they waited too long, and the window of opportunity closed forever. Think of aging not as a countdown to the end, but as a series of chapters in a book you're writing. Each year offers a fresh page, and you, the author, get to decide what goes on it. If you approach life with gratitude, a willingness to love, and an openness to learning, then the latter chapters can be every bit as rich and rewarding as the earlier ones. Perhaps even more so, thanks to the wisdom you accumulate. But if you withdraw from loved ones, harbor anger, or refuse to adapt to life's inevitable changes, those final chapters can become heavy with regret. After leaving the nursing home, I found that I had personally evolved, carrying with me a deeper sense of compassion for others and a greater resolve not to squander the days I still have. The sight of my fellow residents inspired me to reevaluate the way I handle my own health. Although it's impossible to guarantee perfect health, I can still make choices today, like eating more balanced meals, gently exercising as much as my body allows, and trying to maintain a positive mental outlook. Doing so might not shield me completely from illness or injury, but it certainly gives me a better chance to remain active and engaged. And even if my health does decline with time, I'll at least have the satisfaction of knowing I did everything within my power to preserve it, instead of passively accepting a decline and lamenting what might have been. I've also made a conscious decision to simplify my life. Even before my stay, I realized I owned far more than I needed. The process of going to a nursing home forced me to whittle my belongings down to a few essentials: comfortable clothes, a couple of treasured photographs, my favorite books, and some personal hygiene items. Seeing how streamlined my existence became in that environment made me question why, at home, I kept so many objects that only gathered dust. The more I thought about it, the more I wanted to lighten my load, not only physically, but also mentally. I wanted to create the space to breathe, move, and focus on human connection, rather than being weighed down by an avalanche of possessions. Some people might scoff at the notion of decluttering, but I assure you that when you're facing the constraints of old age, you start to see how little use all that clutter truly is. When I reflect on my time at the nursing home, it wasn't all somber. There were moments of genuine camaraderie, like chatting with fellow residents in the common area over evening tea. There were small celebrations when someone's grandchild came to visit and brought homemade cookies. There were times we'd watch classic movies together, or someone would initiate a sing-along of old songs we remembered from our youth. Those bits of warmth and laughter, amid an environment that could easily slip into sadness, were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. We can adapt. We can find joy in the cracks of a challenging situation. And that inspired me to make the most of wherever I am, no matter how difficult the circumstances might seem. Now that I'm back home, my heart remains heavy for those I left behind. I know some of them will remain in that facility for the rest of their lives, with fleeting visits, or perhaps no visits at all. I can't forget the faces of those who stared out the window, longing for something more. Someone to talk to, a new place to see, or simply a hug from someone who cares. In sharing my story, I hope to spark a little more understanding and compassion from those on the outside, who might have an elderly relative or a neighbor in need of a friendly word or a short visit. Too often, we put off that kind of outreach because of our own busy schedules, never realizing how critically important even a 10-minute call can be. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give another human being is our presence, our genuine concern, and our willingness to listen to their stories without judgment or impatience. If there's one overarching message I'd like to convey, it's that every day we wake up is an opportunity to do something kind, to mend a fractured relationship, to express gratitude, or to pursue something that ignites our passion. We can't guarantee how many of these opportunities we'll get, and we can't go back to rewrite the ones we've missed. Life, by its nature, is finite, and we don't always get warnings before our final days arrive. That man I mentioned, who passed away in his sleep without any advanced notice, was a wake-up call for everyone in the nursing home who knew him. It reminded us that while we can plan for the future, we also need to act in the now. Since leaving, I've made it my mission to remain engaged in life. I reached out to my extended family, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, old friends from different stages of my life, former colleagues who might still remember me. We've had phone calls, shared photos from the old days, and even met up in person when possible. I've also decided to volunteer at a local community center, sharing my experiences with younger folks who might be open to hearing an elder's perspective. I'm under no illusion that I can single-handedly change the world, but if I can change the trajectory of one person's life, help them avoid some regrets, spark them to reconcile with someone they've been feuding with, or encourage them to appreciate each day, then I feel like the lessons I learned in those 2 months haven't gone to waste. When people ask me how I stay positive, I tell them that I'm not always upbeat. I have tough days, moments when I miss my younger self or get frustrated by my limitations, but I keep coming back to the insights I gleaned. I know that I can either focus on what I lack or celebrate what I have. Each breath is a chance, and that realization alone can turn a gloomy morning into a hopeful one. Time and health are priceless resources, and while neither can be fully controlled, both can be honored and respected. That means treating my body with kindness, whether through gentle exercise, mindful nutrition, or staying as active as possible within my abilities. It also means extending kindness outward, to neighbors, friends, family, and even strangers, because part of maintaining good emotional health is realizing that we're interconnected. People sometimes assume that once you hit your 70s or 80s, the best parts of life are behind you. I no longer hold that view. While certain physical aspects might indeed wane, there's a depth of insight that can blossom. There's a freedom, paradoxically, that comes from no longer having to prove yourself or climb any more ladders. You can pivot your energy toward what truly warms your heart. You can become a mentor, a storyteller, a guide to those who look up to you. You can take pleasure in the smallest of victories, a flower blooming in your garden, the laughter of a grandchild, the comfort of a good book, or the simple act of being present in a conversation without rushing it along. Above all, I've come to see that aging gracefully is less about physical appearance and more about nurturing a grace of spirit. You learn to accept help with gratitude rather than resentment. You learn to see time as a gift that can be shared, not a dwindling resource to hoard. The more you open your heart to these truths, the more fulfilling your days can become, whether you have 20 years or 2 months left. By the time I left the nursing home, I felt a mixture of relief and melancholy. Relief that I would once again have the comforts of my own home, my own kitchen, my own bed. Melancholy because I knew some of the friends I made there would continue to face long stretches of quiet. But I also walked out with a promise to myself. Never again would I coast through my life without acknowledging how fragile and fleeting it is. In fact, what I once viewed as just a temporary setback has become a pivotal experience that reshaped my entire understanding of what it means to be alive and, eventually, to grow old. I share my story not to paint a grim picture of nursing homes or the twilight years, but to highlight what we stand to gain when we pay attention to life's truths: the necessity of meaningful relationships, the primacy of health over wealth, the diminished value of material things when your mobility and independence are compromised, the power of forgiveness, and the profound importance of savoring each day. If there's a small voice in your head reminding you to call an old friend, to take that dream trip, or to repair a broken bond, listen to it. If you've been neglecting your well-being, remember that your body is your single irreplaceable home in this world. And if you've been chasing external achievements at the cost of your personal fulfillment or the love of those around you, perhaps it's time to reassess your path. I'm 78 now, and even though my nursing home stay ended, the lessons I gleaned remain as vivid as ever. In many ways, I feel reborn, more aware, more present, and more eager to live in alignment with what I've learned. I'm not immune to the aches and pains that come with age, but I'm determined not to let them define me. And I hope that through my testimony, you too can discover or reaffirm what truly matters, no matter if you're 18, 38, or 78 like me, because this precious, fragile life is the only one we get, and each sunrise is a chance to craft it into something worthwhile. Live it well, fill it with love, Seize the opportunities that come your way. And never forget that the greatest regret of all is leaving words unsaid and chances untaken.